Hey there, this is Derek Murphy of creativeindie.com's, also Urban Epics, where I write fiction. Today I'm going to be talking about how to boost your KDP Kindle Amazon book sales by organizing your book reviews and revising all of your content. So basically where I'm at, this is a book I published a few years ago, Taste of Vampire. I'm now finishing the fourth book and coming out with the box set, the full audiobook box set. I'm going to redo all of the covers, all the blurbs, and I'm starting to do some research and organize. It's been a while since I've talked about marketing fiction because I haven't really had anything new. I actually finished the third book earlier this year, and that was supposed to be the last book, but now there's another final book, which took me basically all year to write. This last book is already at 117,000 words, and I've gone through and about half of it is pretty clean, and I'm finishing up the last few battle scenes and chapters. This is more tricky because it's a final ending of a whole series, so I need to do a lot more detail work and wrapping things up, but I think it's going to be pretty strong. I've gone through probably 6 or 7 different versions of the covers for this series. This is the last version. I made a couple maybe a year or two ago, which is fine but kind of simple. It's kind of hard to get dystopian vampires. It's sort of a cross-genre royalty fantasy, post-apocalyptic, genetically engineered vampires. So that's tricky because it's not exactly what people want, but the main keyword is vampire or vampire romance. So that's what I want to try to hit a little bit harder. I will be redoing the covers. It's not totally done yet, but I'm thinking maybe something sort of like this that is a little bit more of a dystopian fantasy vibe to it. I've also been using Midjourney to make some conceptual art for the series. I don't know if I'll use these on book covers or not, but they are pretty great for social media or my email list or my landing page. They kind of give off the right genre or vibe, and there's some really kind of stunning character art. So even just sharing as, cool vampire desktop backgrounds or iPhone backgrounds or whatever, I can see a lot of ways to try to really grab a lot of attention online around my target keywords. I didn't really set out to try to make my main characters, but I kind of just played with keywords until I found some cool things that could fit my main characters. So the two main love interests and maybe the main villain and then the protagonist. Like I mentioned, some of these are so strong, like they could be better book covers than something I made myself. I might test those out later, but for now they're sort of just for fun and to keep me inspired. Especially as I write like the last few bloody action scenes, I needed some good concept art to get my motivation back. So in this final book, I have a lot of possible concept art for my protagonist. It's going to be really hard to choose, but this is going into kind of the final battle with the antagonist. And then I have a lot of concept art of the antagonist, which is tricky because he has to be kind of scary horror vampire, not just sexy brooding vampire. But anyway, the reason I'm making this video and what I really want to talk about today is the blurb, and more specifically using reviews in your sales copy to boost conversion and also discoverability and visibility. So my blurb is not totally terrible, but it needs to be a lot stronger. Once the series is finished and I start advertising, it's really all going to come down to the line of whether or not the series is profitable. If it's profitable, I can keep spending money and hopefully scale up in a pretty big way. But if it isn't, then I'll have to stop advertising eventually, or I'll run out of money, which is what most authors deal with. Even if they have a pretty good book that's done pretty well, it's going to be hard to stay profitable enough to keep the ads going. And if I turn all of the ads off, especially because some of these books came out a few years ago, then the sales really dry up. Right now, besides the blurb, I do have some reviews that I've chosen and featured here. I believe the current Amazon terms of service say that you shouldn't really be doing this. You shouldn't be reusing your Amazon reviews on your inside of your blurb section, but they're not really cracking down on that, and it wasn't the case when I built this a couple years ago. There is also a place down here with editorial reviews where I can add a lot more reviews. I had put this little excerpt in here instead, but that's not really that great. I think I could have a much longer excerpt, or I could have a bunch more reviews. And then real quick, last night I did some research. So I put vampire in Google and also up here in the Kindle store. I can search for vampire or vampire romance, vampire fantasy. I could also try to just look for the young adult books, which is my genre. And then I want to go through the results. So I'll see who is advertising profitably. This one is book 1 of 48. So because the author has so many books out, they can probably spend quite a bit of money advertising this first book. I also want to look at the style of the covers. This is kind of a simple, more typographic, symbolic cover, similar to the Twilight series covers. I want to look at the ones that are sponsored and also the ones that are ranking organically. So if this is not sponsored, but it comes up for the search term vampire, that's pretty significant. And I want to take a look at, why are they doing so well? Part of it's not just what's happening on the page. Part of it is the conversion. So it could be things that you can't really measure, like the cover. It's a pretty clean romance cover, stalked by vampire. There's a lot of tension and conflict in the word stalk, and then it has the keyword for vampire. It's a really simple title. She didn't put all the keyword stuffing or the genre keywords that a lot of other authors put. And then because this is a romance, here it's sort of a dual POV between the two main characters, which works pretty well for romance. Also, this is a pretty well written blurb. It's written for people, which is really important. And she only used the keyword vampire maybe once or twice, and she didn't, stuff it in a powerful way, which is something that I would be tempted to do. So it's always sort of a balance between, stuffing in your keywords and just having a really powerful blurb. If everything's working well together, the conversion is going to be pretty good. And then Amazon will recognize that people who search for vampires bought this book, and that helps Amazon's algorithms. But that also means you can't necessarily just copy what other people are doing, because people are doing things really differently. So here's another one that's sponsored, for example. It's been out for a while. It's got tons of ratings. And in this one, there's a lot more, not exactly stuffing, but it's a lot flashier in terms of all of the reviews up on top, like a whole bunch of reviews up on top, way before you even get to the blurb, which I think is kind of interesting, and it's something that I might want to try out. Basically, before you tell them what the book is about, you convince them that it's awesome and that other people have enjoyed it. I also went to Reddit under the young adult books page, and I searched for the term vampire to see what was coming up and have people recommend their favorite vampire books. So I made a big list of the favorite older and the favorite newer young adult vampire books that readers enjoy. I'll turn this into a big blog post. I might pull out some quotes or make some art. But basically, this is all the great content that's relevant. I can use this for targeting with my ads. I can use it for Facebook ads, targeting people who liked those other pages or books. I could even put together a giveaway of maybe 10 of these favorite books as sort of a package. I haven't done a giveaway for a while for my fiction list, and I'll probably do a pretty big one to build my list with new readers before I launch the full box set. Something I mentioned in another video was that I was checking out Readsy's Discovery program, which I don't necessarily recommend, but only because I Googled vampire books, and Readsy is doing a lot of really good content marketing right now. So one of their posts popped up that was like the best vampire books, and that was sort of for Readsy Discovery, sort of like a free ad for Readsy Discovery, because they would get a lot of people to their website, and then people who are interested in vampire books based on that article on the sidebar it recommended Readsy Discovery books, so that because the problem is with any kind of a website that promises promotion for your book, it's not going to work because they don't have the right kind of audience. But because they were because they wrote an article about the best vampire books, actual readers were landing on the page, because Readsy can't sell services to authors unless they actually have real, legitimate readers also. And I was going to say something like, it's too early for Readsy. They haven't built that audience yet, but they are doing the right kind of things. So I will take out an ad or whatever in Readsy Discovery, mostly so that I can try to get my new vampire book next to that page of vampire content. So sorry for the 10-minute introduction basically for the content of the video, which is going to be about how to organize your reviews. People don't really understand what a good review is or a bad review is. So I've tried to break these down into different sort of categories, because you don't want to just copy a bunch of repetitive reviews that say your book is really good. They're not going to trust those reviews. Every review should be presenting new information that helps the readers make a purchasing decision. So I started with going through my Amazon page and copying a bunch of the reviews. I have like 300 reviews on book one, which is nice. And I don't want to put the full review. I want to edit it down to the most powerful little sentences. I also want to keep an eye out for any potential hooks. So this review starts with, who doesn't love a Prince Charming story with a bloody twist? So I could take this as a review for my hook at the top of my blurb. I'm going to put it up here. So I could put this as a review in bold, or I think you can still do H2 or H3 tags on the KDP section. And you might want to test out the difference between a review, which is third-party proof, versus turning it into a tagline or a hook, which would just be something like this in bold without the quotes. Either of those could work. You might want to test them both. The problem with these is it's a pretty strong hook, but it doesn't have the keyword, which is vampire, which I would really like to have. So what I said here with the reviews is, and these are very quickly generated ideas, but I think you should probably start with what it is, which has keywords. So tell readers what your book is as clearly as possible. So a few that I found that were reviews were these two. I've been on the hunt for my next vampire thrill. This fit the bill. A delicious vampire read. Fit the bill is a little weak. That just means like it was okay, but it doesn't really distinguish why my book was different or better. But still, it's got the keyword twice, which is kind of nice. From an SEO perspective, I think it probably helps, and I'm going to test just having my keyword on the page a lot of times. But like I mentioned, that may not actually work as well as I think it might, because it's going to come down to a lot of other on-page conversion metrics also. Like, you have to have your book show up in the search results, but it also has to be really smooth and clean and easy to read so that people will get the information they need and then buy it or not buy it. You could also start off with a really strong story hook, like go straight into the blurb or the story or the character. Probably your hook on the top line is not going to be part of your blurb. It might be some kind of a teaser. It's really difficult, but you have to try to suggest the conflict, the setting, the story, but most of all, the genre. The next thing I think that you want is why it's different. So same but better. Readers are looking for the same kind of experiences they had earlier, and they're also looking for a justification of quality. So I pulled out a couple of reviews that talk about why this book is different or unique. So truly unique. Every once in a while you fall upon a vampire story that is truly unique. It doesn't happen often, but it happened with this book. And then she lists a bunch of cool stuff, and then she lists that it's a love story. So this is a pretty strong standalone review because it hits a lot of boxes with the keywords and the romance, but also that, most importantly, it's just something that's unique and different. This one also a little darker than my normal reads. That's actually really good because this is a dark fantasy. So this reader may not like dark fantasy, but this review will help other readers to like it a little bit more. So what some readers don't like in a review, even a negative review, could actually be a really positive review for the right readers. I didn't go through my negative reviews yet. I probably should do that just in case. It's a little, scary to get in there, but if you can find a negative review that really didn't like something that a lot of readers actually really like, that could be a strong hook or blurb, even though it's a negative review. So this one also says it's a great new take, so something a little bit different. It's not super strong again, but she also mentions it's a set in a dystopian world. So this is vampire romance keyword, dystopian word keyword, and also that it's something new. And also keep you guessing until the end. So it hints that it's not formulaic or it's not something that's predictable. So I think I like the organization of these categories. So why it's different, same but better. However, these two long reviews aren't super great. So I'd probably try to find something shorter and more powerful. Next, you can get into specific tropes or plot details. This is what your blurb will really discuss later on, but it helps to have a very quick summary of some of the themes of the book so that people can just skim through and get a sense of what the book is before you talk about the specifics of the story. So this one mentions that it's fast-paced and also that the characters evolve, which I think will be attractive to a lot of readers. This one just says this is one of the best vampire books I have read. This is tricky because it hits the keywords. So you would think like this is perfect and I might want to use this for my hook. The problem is that the more superlative the praise, the less likely people will believe it. So just by saying, I even am tempted to edit. Usually you can do light cleanup edits, but in this case, like I want to fix it just from a grammatical point of view as an editor. But if I put ever in here, that would make it even more superlative and so even less likely to be believed. So even though this is like a really strong, powerful hook, I probably wouldn't put it first because I think readers will immediately be skeptical of that kind of praise. However, the next part, it has mystery rebels, dystopian theme, choosing ceremonies. That's a really big one. That's not exactly a genre, but it's a trope that a lot of readers love and expect from some types of dystopian, especially dystopian young adult fantasy. So there's some really nice, very quick listings of some of the things that'll make this book attractive. The story matters, talking about the story, the characters, the setting, that stuff matters, but really, you even, especially in young adult, there's been a trend on TikTok and even on Amazon for authors to just list the tropes and the cliches as sort of a way to sort out, what this book has or what it doesn't have or how it's different or similar. Another review I like quite a bit is this one. A strong character with a heart of gold, that's my protagonist, and a broody vampire who doesn't believe he deserves happiness. I fell in love instantly with them both and couldn't put this book down. So this is a pretty strong standalone review that really identifies the nature of the vampire romance relationship. It doesn't have the keywords. It has vampire, but it doesn't have a lot of like genre keywords or details. But there's a lot more emotion about the characters in this review, which I think is really important. So the next part is comparison titles. I believe Amazon actually doesn't love this in the updated terms of service. By comparison titles, I mean saying something like this book is like, Vampire Academy, Interview with a Vampire, whatever. You're not really supposed to make those claims yourself. I think if it's something that somebody else said in a review, it's a little bit better, although I think you can also still use it because it does help your readers understand how to place this book. I usually put it at the end of my blurbs where I say something like, not this book is just like this other book, but readers who enjoy these other things might also like this book. Anyway, I'd be a little bit cautious because I think it might be against terms of service, but it's not something Amazon is enforcing, and I see a lot of authors continuing to use some version of this. So this first one is just Twilight meets Hunger Games, which is not exactly true, but it's a useful way of quickly understanding, it's a vampire romance set in a dystopian landscape. So Twilight meets Hunger Games is kind of a just quick little description that's sort of true that gives you the right idea. So this could be a really strong hook or blurb. Again, the thing with the skepticism, people, even young adult readers, they may not really like Twilight or they may not really like the Hunger Games, which could be, not in my favor. But these are also two very big famous books. So it's possible by using these, I might even rank a little bit when people are on the Twilight page or when people are searching for Twilight or the Hunger Games. Maybe my book shows up. That's sort of a long shot. So I don't know that this is, the best little snippet, but it is really short and clear, which is the positive. This next one's a little bit messier, although she does mention it's engrossing and addictive. It reminded me a little bit of Hunger Games, Divergent, Selection, Vampire Academy. So that's great. That's four other books that it's similar to, but anybody who's reading this is going to think, well, then it's just derivative crap. But the next part of this review overcomes that objection, yet it's also a completely new look at a dystopian world, scary creatures, bioengineered vampires. So that's really cool. Even though there's sort of this list of comparative titles, which makes my book feel a little derivative, she also mentions the unique features that make my book stand out. So this is something that would be really tricky for me to describe myself in my blurb. And in my blurb, I probably want to focus more on the story conflict. But this is a very useful review because it kind of hits all of these different boxes. And then this one was more just flattering praise, but it does hit a lot of specific details as well. A compelling tale full of raw emotions, tentative romance, beguiling mysteries, dangerous secrets, gut-wrenching heartbreak, pure genius. That last bit about pure genius, I think the original was actually nothing short of pure genius. So that feels great because, who doesn't want to be called a genius? But I don't know that I will use this part because it almost weakens the rest of it. Like this part is really specific and this last part is just hyperbole. And so even though it's pretty strong, I don't know that it's going to be the thing that convinces people, and it might actually make them more skeptical and then not believe the first half, which I probably will use because you want all your reviews to mention different specific details. So for example, this next one, which is kind of similar, a mad, egotistical, power-hungry scientist who's to blame for the whole mess. That's a little bit vague with the mess because this is a truncated review where I took out some from above, but it's probably fine. Along with rebels, werewolf-like creatures. That's kind of nice because my book doesn't actually have werewolves, but they are sort of similar, and they are really common in vampire literature. And then a brave girl who is far from average. That's pretty great too, because a lot of readers are aware of the trend to have Mary Sue characters, which are just kind of flat, empty characters. And because the story is really going to revolve around the protagonist, you have to make sure she's a likable, strong female protagonist that's different maybe from other young adult fantasy, but in a good way. So the next part of this, however, a fabulous, interesting, cannot put it down kind of book, that's that's fine, but I wouldn't want to repeat that too many times. So if I had a bunch of reviews that were just like fabulous, interesting, cannot put it down, that kind of thing, that's nice because it tells readers that it's an interesting, compelling read, but it also doesn't really say anything about the specifics of the story. So it's okay, like as part of a review with more specific details. It's actually a way I can sneak it in. If I just had this on its own, that's kind of a useless review. It doesn't really do anything. But if I have it along with this part that has a lot of specific positive features and benefits that help readers decide whether or not this is the type of book that they want to read, then it's pretty strong altogether. I actually had some pretty good ideas on how to optimize my Amazon page today that usually I would just get excited and make a video and share everything, but I found that I'm a slow writer, and what tends to happen is everybody else uses my ideas before I get the chance to use them. So I'm going to keep a tighter lid on a few of the things that I'm going to do until I have time to actually do them myself. But I will be sharing some of this stuff in the 21-day bestselling author platform course. However, I just had a different insight that I think is pretty cool, and I'm not going to censor myself. So since you're watching this video, if you've actually, gone through all the content so far, which I know has been pretty fast, I'm going to share a little insight with you that I think is kind of interesting. So one of the things that you can do with your book reviews is put them inside the front of the book themselves. Not all of them, but like I mentioned, if I go through and I edit them down and I have 5 or 10 really strong reviews that don't just repeat themselves and say a bunch of nice platitudes, if I put those in the front of my book, it can help get people excited. Not only is it in the look inside part, so if they're looking inside the book, they can just read all those reviews really quickly, but also before they start actually reading the book, especially if like I do a free campaign for book one in the series and a lot of people download it, I have to make sure they're excited to start reading it or else they might give up too early. So I can kind of stack the weight in my favor by putting some reviews first. But the clever insight that I just realized is that because my book is a dystopian vampire book, my characters aren't actually called vampires. I think maybe that term is used once or twice in the whole book one. Most of the time they're called something else, which means, and I'm not sure if this is true, but I think it's possible that part of how Amazon uses keyword data is to scan the inside of the book itself for keywords. That may or may not be true, but my point is that it might help my book to rank better for vampire as a keyword if I have the word vampire in the book more times. So by putting in all of these reviews that say vampire a bunch of times, like if I have 10 reviews and they use the word vampire 10 times and I put that at the front of my book, that might give me a little bit of an added weight just to help Amazon kind of figure out whether or not my book really satisfies the condition that people are searching for. So the next part, going back to our regular programming, is unexpected quality. So you don't want, like I mentioned, just a bunch of reviews that say how great your book was, because those are kind of empty. You want specific details. However, you also want some reviews that overcome objections from readers. So not only hit the positive benefits and the qualities, but also say why they were surprised or it wasn't, predictable or formulaic, or it was better than they expected. So this is one, for example, that's decent. Amazing thriller, suspense, romance that hits a bunch of the main keywords. Kept me on the edge of my seat and I couldn't sleep until it was finished. This is similar to could not put it down. A lot of my reviews say could not put it down, like this one down here, which is fine, but this is more detailed and more specific. 5 stars, which is a quality indicator. for how real the story felt. A lot of my reviews say something like this, that my scenes are well described so they can see it play out like a movie. And then it mentions a crazy cliffhanger, which on the one hand, some readers don't like cliffhangers. So this is not really a selling benefit, but this will help to preempt negative reviews, because if they just read the book and got to the cliffhanger, then they would be upset. But if you forewarn them that it's going to end with a cliffhanger, the people who buy the book are going to be less likely to leave negative reviews because they weren't surprised. And then definitely buying the rest of the series is pretty good also. It shows that they enjoyed it enough to keep reading. So here's kind of a similar version. Loved it, could not put it down. Fan of Twilight, Hunger Games, but this was the best. I want to say like this was even better as an editor, but it's fine and I wouldn't edit it. So this is an interesting review because it basically says, you know, it's better than Twilight and Hunger Games, which is awesome. But again, that might make readers more skeptical than they need to be. But this is a good review because it mixes, you know, could not put it down. It's fast-paced read with comparative review titles with specific genre keywords: vampire, romance, suspense, thrilling, action read. There's a lot of meat, a lot of content in this short review. But I probably wouldn't put this review and this review together because even though they use different words, they're saying a lot of the same things. Here's another short one that just says, if you love exciting dystopia. So that's one keyword. Dystopia fiction is actually not a super popular keyword, so I wouldn't necessarily try to hit this keyword at the expense of other things. I think vampire romance or suspense thriller is gonna be more profitable because more people are searching for them. But it says the ending was a surprise, a nice twist that bends the genre. So that's kind of nice that it's a surprise and a twist. Readers this is sort of what's called an open loop, where you present a lack of information to increase interest. So readers will read this and think, well, what was the twist? What was the surprise? This is withholding information to create intrigue. And then this one's pretty good. The next few are more what I'm trying to say with the unexpected quality. Best book I've read in a while. I've been in a book rut lately. I came upon this book one night hoping it would be a decent read, and wow. Anyway, so the idea that this is a reader who reads lots of books, but they've been in a book rut, and that this, like, they had mediocre expectations, and this book exceeded the expectations. That's a pretty strong review, because that's the biggest fear or doubt that readers are going to face. Is this really going to be better? Like, I'm a, you know, smart, savvy reader who reads a lot of books. Is this really going to be something that's worth my time? So here's a similar one. I've not enjoyed a story this much in the last 100 or so reads. That's great. So this is like 1 in 100. That's a pretty strong, specific statistic in the review that I probably want to feature higher up. Also, did not see the ending coming, which is great because it means, you know, I can tell a story without giving away the ending. And then this one's a little bit weird. Used talent, not trash, to tell a fantastic tale. That's a little bit weird, but some readers might be influenced by that because maybe they're skeptical and they read a lot of what they consider to be trash and they appreciate well-written stories. Those are a little bit tricky because the more, like, if I focus on the keywords, I know my story is delivering those keywords. I know that it's a suspenseful vampire dystopian thriller, so I'm definitely going to deliver on those claims. But if I say something like, you know, this is amazing literature, this is written in a way that's not trashy, on the one hand, I don't know that that's necessarily a selling feature at all, because I think trashy vampire romance books, that's a genre that people want. That's not trashy in a negative sense. That's trashy in terms of fast, maybe vulgar, maybe sexual, but that's hot stories that people enjoy. So I don't care if I'm called trashy, and actually it might be better to be trashy. So like, this may turn off the majority of the readers who are looking for a trashy read, but it'll also attract maybe those highbrow readers who are looking for something a little bit more satisfying. Anyway, so that's a little bit of a tricky one. I kind of like it, but it's also, it's complicated. This one is also pretty good. I think I edited this a tiny bit. It wasn't a question. I turned it into a question, but basically tired of predictable books. I don't actually love my author name, which kind of sucks. D.S. Murphy is what I'm using for my fiction. I also use Drake Mason as a pen name. It's just kind of hard to write in the reviews. But anyway, takes what you expect of a book, turns it 45 degrees, launch it into the stratosphere. That's cool. Basically, this is not what you would expect, or this is different than you would expect. That's kind of what a lot of readers are looking for, something that's new and different while also hitting all of the genre tropes. And then also there's some specific keywords: intrigue, secrets, interesting plot, unusual characters, and vampires. So that's not terrible. It hits some of the main keywords, and mostly, like, I want a couple reviews, or one review at least, to do all of these different things. So I'm going to have to go back through and edit these down and make choices so that I don't have reviews that are just saying the same thing. I want the strongest phrasing that I can find. So finally, the last one is qualifiers. I haven't found a better way of naming this, but basically a qualifier would be something that a confused readers won't buy it, even if they know what it is. I haven't given them enough detail yet. I want to accurately describe my book so I don't give the wrong impression, or else people will be dissatisfied with the story. So the main one is, because this is a vampire romance, because it's young adult, some readers will be looking for clean young adult, and some will be looking for sort of dirty adult, young adult. Young adult is sort of a weird space because a lot of the readers are actually middle-aged women, and a lot of them are looking for, more heat. But I don't want to. The problem is basically, like, if I'm advertising this book and if I'm spending money for Facebook or Amazon ads, and half the people who are clicking my ads want a clean book, and half of them want a reverse harem sex book, then I'm going to be losing either half of those people. And I have to be clear with my description so that they're not, upset or disappointed when they buy the book, or they just don't buy the book because they're not really sure what they're getting. I don't want to leave any lingering doubt. So a qualifier is something that pulls in the right readers and screens out the wrong readers by being very clear about what the book is. So here are a few that I've pulled. Here are some more that say the writing is so vivid I could picture all the scenes. But this is a good one. There was hardly any romance, but I enjoyed the book. So that actually might hurt me because most people reading vampire romance, that's what they really want. So this might even be a little bit too risky because, hardly any romance. There's a lot of romantic tension in my book. So it's not that it's not true. There's hardly any physical romance, because that is true. But I don't want to make it seem like there's no romance in the book either. I'm going to skip down to this one because this is a bit clearer. For those who can't survive reading a vampire romance without any steam, you may want to move along and skip this book. That's a really strong, almost like a call to arms. It's almost like combative, sort of, but in a way that I think will work, because it basically says, like, this book is not for you, or this is not the book you are looking for, which I think will actually make people, sit up straight and pay more attention to the next part. But also does a good job of, it is a vampire romance, so it's different than saying hardly any romance, but also without any steam. Anyway, so it's a low steam vampire romance, which I think is accurate. But if you're like me and you want to see the relationships between human heroines and vampires develop slowly, this is also like what I would call a slow burn, low steam romance. Taste of Vampire is the one to go for. So it starts with the qualifier, this book is not for you, but then it goes into the So it kind of overcomes this one very clear objection surrounding the steam level or the heat level, and then moves into the quality level. The story is amazing. Post-apocalyptic world, vampires and humans live in peace. This is a bit too long, but there's some good stuff in here. And then the other one I really like is I love that the main character isn't just a girl waiting to be saved. So this is also sort of a qualifier. This is also sort of what makes this book unique and different. This is not a Mary Sue character. This is a, you know, not just a cliche or a trope. This is maybe a little bit stronger of a character than I have in some of my other novels, which is why I think a lot of my reviews are saying this. And then I added one last one that's just an example of a boring review. So this is a really good review, but it doesn't say anything about the story or the genre or the details of the characters or the plot. It just says it's really good, basically. So it's not a terrible review. This is a really good review. It mentions, I guess, unexpected plot twists and turns. So that's, you know, unexpected resolution, action, romance, excitement. So it does have a little bit of details, but they're just really vague and could apply to, you know, any book. Characters, concept, yeah, this could be written for like any book in the world, which is why it's not super great. Although I do like this part. This book grabs you and doesn't let you go to the very last word, and then it still has its claws in you for the next book. That part alone, because it's a little bit more visual and a little more specific, that part alone I kind of like. I might try to use that part somewhere. The other thing you can do in terms of qualifiers is just make a bullet point list. Like after I go through and edit all these reviews and pick out maybe a bunch of them I cut or I'm not going to feature, but I might just try to make a list of the things that people are saying in terms of defining this book and putting those into a simple checklist. Like this book has these things, or this book is for you if you like these things. So normally I would do something like this. This one's not from one of my books. I took this from one of the other vampire books. But this is something I would usually do at the end of my blurbs, which is a very clear description of the biggest questions that readers will still have. So this is a medium burn romance suitable for upper YA. That means it's a little more adult, a little spicier, with violence and non-graphic love scenes. This actually would fit my book pretty well. I don't ever want to copy something word for word. You want to be really careful when you're doing your research and looking at other books in your genre that, you know, you get inspiration, but you're very careful not to ever use something that anybody else is using. Perfect for fans of vampire romance, vampire wish, Hunger Games, fairy games. This hits a couple of good keywords. Also just makes it very clear what type of story this is and who it's for. So something like this is great at the end of the blurb, but I could also turn this into some kind of like a checklist that just says all of the things. Anyway, that's basically what I wanted to talk about in this video. Hopefully I've talked about a lot of things that might be useful. This page that I'm showing you is how the page currently looks. And like I mentioned, I'm going to be doing some new things that I'm a little reluctant to share because I think they're going to be really powerful and nobody else is doing them yet. But if you visit this page in another month or so around Halloween when I've got the last book finished and I've had time to redo all of the content, I'll have new covers, a revised blurb, and some other sneaky things that I think are going to be pretty awesome. This book right now isn't selling very well, although it has done pretty well in the past. But once I start running ads to it again, I think I'll be able to be profitable on the back end because now it'll be a 4-book series. And these are long, like 100K books in Kindle Unlimited. I'll probably raise the prices a bit, but I might mostly be focused on, like, I'll sort of test things out with the individual books until I'm sure they're working, and then I'll focus on the box set collection, which, because it's a higher price tag, it'll probably be easier to break even with advertising. And that's probably where I'll focus most of my efforts. I've noticed that where, you know, you may look up an author and it looks like their series isn't really selling that well, but they're actually making all of their money on the box set because that's the one that they're promoting. So you can check back in if you want. I don't recommend you read this book unless, you know, you like young adult upper YA dystopian vampire novels. Otherwise, you are not the right reader. I don't recommend authors buy my books because I don't want to muddy my targeting or screw up Amazon's algorithm. So unless you buy a lot of books like this, it actually hurts me if you buy my book. That said, if this is the type of thing that you like to read or you want to check out what I'm doing, then you're welcome to buy it. I actually get a lot of reviews because I talk about publishing and authorship. I get a lot of reviews from authors who buy my books to see whether or not I can write or if I'm just a crappy internet marketer. And then they leave a review like, I'm pleasantly surprised that this guy can actually write, but I didn't expect him to be able to write because he knows about marketing or whatever. Anyway, those reviews are kind of weird. I don't want authors buying my books to see whether or not they're better than me. I want actual readers who are going to enjoy my books. So that's why I don't use my platform, my YouTube platform especially, to market my books. I have a separate platform just for young adult fiction and fiction in general. I'm actually ranking pretty well. Let's do a quick test. Yeah, so if I just Google YA vampire books, I'm actually on the first page of Google with one of my fiction blogs, which is great. That's something I'm going to be focused on a lot more once the series is done and everything is updated and profitable. I'll be focusing a little bit more on SEO to see if I can, rank #1 on Google for vampire books in general, and then have, stunning covers, stunning art, great blurbs, great reviews, and just try to keep some of those sales organic so I'm not spending as much on advertising. If you like this video, I tend to do pretty deep dives in writing and publishing and marketing, so feel free to subscribe and follow along. I hope I'll be talking more about this stuff as I launch new books, but I'm also sort of a slower writer. So like every 6 months or year or so, I get a little bit of enthusiasm back for the marketing. I've talked about a lot of this stuff in the past, and I have a lot of videos and courses talking about book design and book marketing, but I haven't been doing it actively, I feel like for the last year or two, because I've been busy mostly working on like book 2s and book 3s in the middle of a series, and I can't really market until I get my series wrapped up. So that's why I've been quiet on YouTube. And I probably will continue to be pretty quiet, although I have this box set finishing up. I hope I have one more novel for another box set, then I'll have 2 completed series. But then it might take me like another year to finish some of my other series. So anyway, thanks a lot. Leave me any comments if you have them. I always take the time to try to read and interact with people on YouTube, although I'm more active on maybe the Guerrilla Publishing Facebook page, or you can just find me at Creative Indie, which is my main blog. Bye-bye.